I became an orphan at 8 years old. My family died while I was upstairs in my room. I think my best friend killed them. By Creepy Scribbler. I am now 25 years old and have been carrying this burden around with me for a long time. I feel that if I write it down, it will ease a lot of the issues that I deal with on a daily basis. I feel a lot of guilt even though I didn't do anything wrong. I have done things that I'm not proud of and always blamed it on my past. Something today made all of the memories come flooding back. Nobody knows who killed my family. The killer apparently fled the scene and was never caught, but I have a terrifying feeling that my best friend killed them. I know that this couldn't be possible though, as my best friend was my imaginary friend named Timothy. 8 might seem quite old to have an imaginary friend, but I didn't have any friends of my own. For some reason, other kids took an instant dislike to me. I have a vivid memory of being rejected constantly as a young child, asking whether I could join a game of tag or cowboys and Indians just to be told no. Timothy was always there when I needed him. He lived in the cupboard in my old room. He was the same age as me, with bright blonde hair, blue eyes, and he dressed a lot older than his age as well. He looked like he was wearing the sort of clothes that my grandfather would wear. My childhood was often lonely. My father and mother drank almost all the time, and my older sister was a saint in their eyes. The truth, though, was she used to terrorize me and physically abuse me. There was even one time she pushed me down the stairs because I wouldn't let her have my cookie. My parents, though, would always blame me or just told me to toughen up. She is a girl, they always used to say to me. Stop being such a wimp. She was 13 years old and towered over me, so for my 8-year-old self I felt threatened and scared. There were, however, some good brief moments that I can remember. That was in between all of the drinking and torment. This was one of them days. My parents took us to the zoo. It was like we were a family all day. No drinking, no verbal or physical abuse. It was surreal. When I got home, Timothy seemed angry that I had been out all day. I told him how wonderful it was, how I felt like part of a normal family. He said that it wouldn't last and something has to be done to help me. He was always correct. That evening my parents went out leaving my sister to look after me. She left me alone for most of the evening until she got back from her friends. That's when she became bored. She marched up the stairs and slammed into my door. It flung open as she demanded that I clean her shoes. I naturally said no, that it wasn't my problem that her shoes were dirty. She proceeded to grab my neck and force it down to the ground. She then screamed at me to lick them clean, while shoving my head into her feet. I was wailing in anger and pain as I clawed at her legs, begging her to let go. All of a sudden she let out an uncontrollable scream as I felt her grip loosen as she flew backwards out of my room, like someone had pushed her. As she lay on the floor outside, my door slammed shut and my drawers next to my door slid across it, blocking anyone from opening it. I looked over and Timothy was stood next to the door. His normally kind face was now contorted in anger. He had never been able to interact with objects or people. It was in my head. Even now, in almost hazy memory, I could see the rage in his face. Was my imagination this good as a kid? I had always thought, in my anger, I had shoved my sister off me and barricaded the door. My mind then imagined Timothy doing it to cover up the bad memories. This is when Timothy turned. He shouted at me in frustration. How could I let them treat me like this? How he had enough of seeing me suffer this way. I was scared and just didn't know what to say back. He was right. He was always there for me in the aftermath of the abuse. I always thought this was my coping mechanism, almost like I had developed a complex friend so I wasn't alone in my time of need. Now looking back, he felt so real. Later that evening, I heard my parents get home. I could tell they were drunk and heard the muffled complaints from my sister through the door. I cried non-stop in terror as I knew how they could and would react as I rushed onto my bed and under the blanket. I heard my dad crash up the stairs and rattle my door handle. When he couldn't get in, he banged to smash into my door. He was shouting abuse on what I had apparently done to my sister. He said he was going to kill me. I was still hid under my blanket, tears rolling down my face. I then heard Timothy's voice. It was a lot calmer than before. Stay hidden. It will all be over soon. The next thing I heard from outside of the safety of my room still gives me nightmares. The agonizing screams of my mother and sister, my dad suddenly leaving the other side of my door and running downstairs. A few seconds later he was begging for his life before letting out a terrifying cry. I heard a large thud, then silence. I waited under my blanket for what seemed like days until I saw the glow of blue flashing lights. The muffled sound of people once again sounded from outside of my room. My handle soon turned as two sets of footsteps walked in. They threw off my blanket as I let out a teary yell. It was the police. I can't really remember too much after that. I didn't understand why my room wasn't barricaded still by the drawers. I never saw Timothy again after that night. I consequently went to live with my paternal grandparents. They were complete opposite to my parents in every way. I found out a few years later that they had tried for a number of years to get custody of me and my sister, but were shut out of our lives almost entirely. I asked them many times what happened to my family, and for a long time they refused to tell me any real details other than they were killed by a home intruder. I get why. There were so many questions that didn't get answered. My grandfather passed away last week, and I have been helping my grandmother with some of his old stuff. We were looking through his parents' old photo album from the 1930s. There was a black and white photo of him as a boy. As I looked at the second photo, my stomach dropped. My young grandfather, who was stood next to a boy that looked identical to Timothy. I uttered through shaky words to my grandmother, "Who was that?" She replied, "That was your grandfather's brother. He tragically died when he was a boy from tuberculosis." I snapped the book closed as my breathing grew deeper. My grandmother was concerned by my reaction. I explained to her about my imaginary friend named Timothy I had when I was a boy, how he always looked out for me and that he looked exactly like the boy in the photo. She said that maybe I had seen a photo of him when I was young and imagined him in real life, but I can't think of when I would have seen the photo of him. And it makes me wonder, looking back, did my overactive imagination create Timothy, or was it actually really him looking out for me? If it was him though, like his ghost, spirit or whatever, could he have really killed my family?